Thank you. Sorry about that. All right. Well, first of all, thank you, Paula, for being with us today. I know added meetings are not always fun, so we'll try and get started and keep us on time. So I think the first thing we need is, can somebody make the motion for our meeting to be held electronically?
I'll do that. I think I need to read this. I move that the items on the meeting agenda constitute essential business of this committee, that meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans, considering the COVID-19 outbreaks, and any rule conflicting with governor's executive order permitting electronic meetings must be suspended.
Awesome. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and do the roll call. So let us know that you're present, accept the motion, and if you have any conflicts. I don't know who does. Shanley, do you have our list? Or Susie? Or I can just go through.
Yes, I do. I can go through the list of committee members. Give me 1 second, my computer.
Oh, okay. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I could just read the panelists.
I've got it pulled up now. I'm going to go through the whole list so we see who's not here, if anyone's not here. Elena.
Present, yes, and no conflicts.
Ash. I don't think Ash is here.
They're off today.
Beth. Okay. Beth.
Present, yes, no conflicts.
Catherine.
Present, yes, and no conflicts.
Daryl.
Present, yes, none.
Jesse.
Present, yes, and none.
Julie.
Present, yes, and no conflicts.
Martina.
She emailed that she was going to miss today.
Okay. Molly R. Molly M.
Present, yes, no conflicts.
And TJ.
Present, yes, no conflicts, and you said my name very disappointed. My neighbor's getting a new roof. I was just saying, you said my name very disappointedly. We didn't assign a timekeeper, just FYI.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, TJ. Who wants to keep us on time? Timekeeper?
Ash is not present and has always done it, so somebody else needs to jump in. I'm doing notes, so it can't be me.
Someone can do it.
I can do it.
All right, great. Thanks, Beth. And then just is there a volunteer to read the equity statement? Values and equity.
I can do that if you want.
That'd be great. Thank you, Beth.
Okay, we define racism as racial prejudice plus the misuse of power by systems and institutions. Misuse can be intentional or unintentional. We are mindful of the racial inequities across housing, economic mobility, healthcare, criminal justice, and other systems. These all contribute to racial inequities and homelessness. I pledge to stay mindful of the power and privilege that I bring into every space that I enter and conversation that I have. I pledge to actively and intentionally practice anti-racism when participating in data committee meetings, representing this committee and the COC in the community, and in talking about homelessness and housing issues in Nashville.
Thank you. Awesome. All right, so I just appreciate all of you guys are here. Just before we go into some debriefing from our previous meeting, are there any corrections to the minutes? Does any have any amendments? Okay.
I don't have anything on the minutes, but I have just a quick announcement, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Yes, so this will be TJ's last meeting as a data committee member because he will be starting at the Homeless Impact Division as our new ESG HMIS coordinator. So we are very excited for that, and he will continue in this work, but just wanted to let this group know.
Awesome. Congratulations, TJ. That's great. Yay. Well, we'll miss you from the committee, but so glad you're still in the community. That's awesome. Oh,
I'll be around.
yay. All right.
Also, Molly Richards said she is on the call. She had to call in, and she's not sure we can hear her. So I asked her which number is hers.
Okay, that'd be great. And then once we find out what number it is, she can move up to. Okay. All right. Well, while we're waiting to get Molly Richards into the panelists, I guess we'll start with our agenda, first agenda item. We'll just review it really quickly. We did want to just debrief from our meeting last month. I think it was challenging on lots of levels. And so we invited Paula here, and I'm so grateful that she's here, and she was gracious enough to follow up with some matters. And then we'll talk a little bit about what we'll do with the gaps analysis, hopefully, because we just didn't want it to just die out. You know, where does that go from there? And then we'll continue to talk about outreach numbers and data. And then I think there's one last agenda item. And then we do want to touch on the fact that we might have to think about meeting in person at some point since it ends at the end of this month. Motion. So,
Elena?
yes.
Oh, sorry. Can I just it's Paul, right, who's our host? Hey, Paul, can you unmute 617-257-3342? I don't know if you heard me.
Got it.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I don't know, Molly, did you want to say some words before, we hand it over to Paula and just kind of, get us started?
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Paula, for being here. Yeah, we wanted to debrief the call from last month. There was a committee member who said different comments on the call that were harmful and offensive and racist and sexist and made lots of generalizations. And we felt that it was important to talk about it as a committee, to check in with people, see how people are feeling, and also to discuss how to move on and like what we should be doing in the moments, because I think it was hard for some people to respond in the moment. It kind of caught people off guard, and it can be hard to respond when you're not prepared. So talking about, what we can do as a committee and also what the planning council can do to help support committee members in scenarios where someone is being harmful and we need to react to this. So thank you, Paula, for being here, and thanks to everybody for being here too, and hopefully participating in the debrief of that, what happened.
Well, thanks, Molly. You guys, can you hear me? Switched my microphone stuff a minute ago, and it sometimes doesn't always switch when you think it does. So, well, thanks for inviting me here this morning, you guys. And I don't want to take up too much time because I know you've got a full agenda as well. But I definitely wanted to touch base with all of you and let you know that your concerns have been heard. Wheels turn slowly sometimes. Our Metro legal liaison was sick for a while and he was out, so he's catching up. And so we still need to have a discussion with our Metro legal before we form a absolute plan for what happens next. But I wanted to take a few minutes to let you know that it did not fall off of anyone's radar, that we do take this incredibly seriously, and we will figure out what happens at this point. What will happen from my perspective is that we will have an executive committee meeting of the Planning Council. And at that meeting, we will discuss what happened in your meeting and formulate a plan as to how to address it. So I just wanted to let you know that that was the process, so that you didn't think it was just being ignored. But beyond that, I listened to the recording of your meeting last time, which is one of the advantages of this particular time. We have all this, recorded, not just on paper, but live. So I was able to listen to the meeting, and I heard for myself some of the issues and the comments that were made. I agree that kind of behavior is not acceptable. So we'll discuss it and figure out how to address it. But I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to say anything else that you feel like you needed to say, or give me any other information, or how you feel, or even thoughts about what you think needs to happen. If you wanted to do that today. If you don't, that's fine. Again, we will definitely address the issue as soon as we are able to do that. So.
I'd love to say I appreciate Molly M sort of jumping in last week and not sort of letting us go on with business as usual. And, I'm not good in these situations. I sort of freeze. And so I appreciate that you didn't, and that you said you felt sort of frozen, but you managed to articulate it. One complicating factor is that the committee member in question is, to my knowledge, the only person on the committee who's actually experienced homelessness. And we want voices of people who have been homeless to be part of the Planning Council and its committees, and we can't tolerate that kind of racist commentary, and that sort of poses an additional dilemma for me, and just wanted to raise that.
Thank you both.
I did want to jump in and say, Paula spoke with Steve, and he's not allowed to be on the call as a speaker, but it's possible that he's called in as a listener. So he may be present and listening, just FYI to everybody, but just be transparent.
Yeah, to follow up on Beth's comment, I agree. I mean, it's a really conflicting place to be, because you want that voice at the table. I know last Friday we had a committee chair meeting, and I did reach out to I can't remember the name of the committee, but the recruiting committee, can't remember the name of it, but just, so that we can, ask for more recruitment with individuals with lived experience that we can recruit to the committee. So I'm hoping membership committee, maybe, I can't remember the name of it, but
it's membership. Grant Winter is the chair.
Right. Yeah, because I agree with you, Beth. I mean, we need that voice at the table. So.
And just by the way, the membership committee has invited Sheila Decker and Dion Trotter. Sheila's the chair of that committee, and then Dion is the staff person who's been trying to staff that group. It's had some difficult, I'm talking about the Consumer Advisory Board, but that is sort of the vehicle through which we try and get sort of formal input from folks with lived experience. And I think they've been somewhat crippled over the COVID, period. And those two folks are going to come to membership at their next meeting, just to discuss how we can strengthen that group and get the voice of people with lived experience.
And I don't want to imply that there is only one voice of lived experience. Just, we don't want to make anybody the representative of their group, whether it's a racial group or an experience group. People have varied experiences. So to the extent that we could have a couple of people on each committee that represent folks with lived experience, that would be great. It's a burden. Those of us who have cushy jobs can more readily devote the time to this sort of thing.
Beth, I think that's a great assertion that we have, this is part of our jobs. This is stuff that we do in our communities for the most part. And we have the luxury of being able to attend meetings and be a part of the process. Sometimes folks with lived experience are trying so hard to survive each day that this is not their priority. So recruiting folks who are willing and wanting to stay on these committees and do this work is extremely difficult, but that doesn't mean that we should stop trying to find them. So I think that our membership committee, our nominating committee, they're very committed to trying to find more voices that can, as you say, give a broad example of lived experience, because not everyone's experience will be the same no matter what. So thank you for that. And I will say that I'm happy that the committees that look for new members are very committed to making sure that we are reaching the community for whom we all work. So I think it's incredibly important for their voices to be heard as much as possible.
Elena, do you want to debrief at all the conversation in the equity group about this too?
Yeah, and Julie, please jump in. I was going to mention that. So if I'm forgetting something or not using the right words, please let me know. But so I think it was last week, maybe the week before, the Diversity and Equity Committee invited me to their meeting to kind of just summarize, what happened, the occurrence. And they were just so grateful in kind of just hearing what had happened and really wanted to figure out, what they can do to help support if events like this happen in the future. And I think, what I heard and was, just kind of looking at our charter and saying, like, how can we expand, when harmful things happen in a meeting, what are our options? What is the authority? What's the chain of command? So that was, I think, a piece of it, and just making sure we're being specific about language and not just, maybe physical harm, but just verbal harm too that happen in these meetings. And then also, I think we talked about some ideas. Bill Friskis Warren shared some, just kind of, many of you guys may have been in meetings that have just some common ground rules, and just making sure we're reviewing what those common ground rules are, making sure that that's talked about at the beginning. And then lastly, we were talking about, well, what can we do if we want to not just banish somebody, but really kind of be more involved, and kind of how do we help this person grow if they're willing to do that. And so I think something around transformative justice, and that might not be the right word, some of that framework might be helpful in this space. So that happened, and they are aware and trying to work on some solutions that they can bring forward, trainings and things like that. So yeah, and I just really want to touch on a reflection is that I was grateful to have the equity statement that we read every beginning of the meeting. And I think it helped in our meeting last month, because we were able to kind of just point to that and say, like, okay, no, Molly did the right, we said we were going to stop and recognize when this happens, and let's talk about it. And just to have a clear-cut statement like that, saying how you're going to show up, and what we will and won't tolerate was helpful. But Julie, what did I miss anything from that?
No, I think that covers it. And, we did talk about how some of those restorative practices might be something that's longer term, kind of a capacity building issue of, creating kind of a separate committee or space with people who are really trained and familiar with those practices. But Hannah Cornfield from the YWCA is on that committee, and she's, they have some expertise on that that they, I think are willing to bring to this group. So
with that, I want to make sure that you guys know, who are your committee chairs? I'm sorry, I can't. It's Elena and Molly. That's right. Okay, that's what I thought. One of the things that you need to know, and I think this is part of that ongoing, committee chair, training and things that we are trying to do, is that you are empowered to oversee this committee during its meetings. And, If you think that there is something happening that needs to stop, you have the authority and the power in the moment to make that decision. And you need to be able to know that, and you're supported in that. So I think the example would be if in a committee is happening and someone's behavior is intolerable and that person is asked to cease that behavior and they do not, you have the ability to ask your host on this particular meeting to mute that person. Or if the committee is meeting in person and the behavior won't stop, you have the authority to end the meeting and adjourn until such time as the behavior can be dealt with. None of you have to sit and listen to and be subjected to inappropriate racist behavior or any other kind of aggressive behavior. It's not appropriate. And so you do have the authority and the power to oversee your committees in the moment in the best way that you see fit when it comes to these kinds of things. And I want you to hear that and know that, and you will be supported in whatever decision you make in that regard. So I want you to know that the leadership of the Planning Council absolutely, appreciates the position that you have been put in, and we agree that the behavior should not be tolerated. And we will work very hard to put processes in place and make sure that these issues are addressed when they have to be. And my hope is that these are few and far between, these kinds of issues. I believe wholeheartedly, and look, I know Steve is listening, and Steve, I appreciate Steve's voice. I appreciate his passion. But I will say that I have been on the receiving end of his ire, and he knows that, and we've talked about it, and we don't agree on a lot of things, but I do appreciate his voice, and I always will. However, that doesn't excuse his behavior, nor does it allow him the opportunity to express those opinions inappropriately. So we will figure out what we need to do going forward, but I want you guys to know that we support all of you in the work that you're doing and appreciate everything that you do.
Thank you, Paula. That was really helpful. And, I do feel empowered a little bit more knowing some of those authority that we have. So,
well, I'm going to then, unless anyone has anything else they'd like to say before I hop off, I'm going to let you guys get on with your meeting. Figuratively speaking, my door is always open. So if you need anything, anybody, please just don't hesitate to let me know.
Okay, great. Thanks, Paula, so much for being here.
Sure. Well, good luck.
Thanks.
Thank you, Paula.
Okay. Well, hopefully, people are still recovering and working on whatever space they may need to be in, and grateful for Paula for being here. And thank you to those that also expressed concerns directly. So we appreciate that. Okay. Should we're okay to move on? People feel in a space to do that? Okay. Molly, did you have any kind of concluding words that you would like to share?
I guess I thought there might be a bit more time to debrief if anybody needed that time to talk about what happened, but maybe people are not wanting to, and that's totally fine. And it's been a month, so sometimes it's hard to get back into that headspace. But no, I just appreciate everyone who's here, and I appreciate you continuing to work with us. I know that we're all during our time to be here, and that's why it's so important that we create a space where people that they can be safe, and that people aren't gonna traumatize them in a space where we're all very busy and we come here with a lot on our plates and we try to contribute, and so to come with that kind of perspective and then be harmed in the process, it can be really detrimental to the people who participate, and it could cause people to leave the committee, and I would hate for that to happen. So I want to do whatever I can to make sure people feel good about being here. So thank you all for being here.
Can we, before we hear back from kind of the larger powers, can this group establish rules of engagement of our own? And I think maybe it's just a supplement to the equity, be a supplement or kind of a way of operationalizing or establishing rules respective to that, and just like how we communicate with each other, but maybe also how we call that out, and just having that framework ahead of time will help all of us, I think, in the moment. I wasn't at the meeting last month, but I did watch the recording of the meeting. And one thing that just stands out to me as a potential rule would be, we don't, obviously generalize or talk about people. We talk about, or groups of people, we talk about the underlying systems and the reason that disparities exist. And so just wondering if that's a possibility for this group to do.
I think that's a great idea. And originally, when we even were planning to write that anti-racism personal pledge, we were going to then write a different statement, like an anti-racism statement for the committee and how we would interact and communicate on the committee. And we didn't get to that. So I would love for our committee to do that. We might need to have like a few people work on it on the side if possible, and maybe bring a draft to the committee. I think that, yeah, lots of groups have ground rules for how you communicate, but we should probably have you don't always think you should have to, but I think, yes, we should have very specific language around the things you just mentioned.
There's also been other groups that, this is probably not the right Robert's rules, you can have co-chairs, and then if the COC allows for the appointing of other official roles within the committees, there have been groups that have an established, I don't think it's the sergeant of arms, or it's like the official kind of keeper of the ground rules. So the person who is delegated to, ensure them. So somebody maybe who has that strength of in the moment being able to.
Parliamentarian.
It's not it's a different role. I can ask somebody who does it's a little bit different. It's more of kind of never mind. I'm not going to find the right word, so I'll just I'll follow up.
Well, Julie, I think you're right, because we have some up for our National Consumer Advisory Board, and I know Bill shared some of those ground rules, and it's almost someone in the meeting that's like a temperature check person, and just kind of being aware of people's space at that moment, and then maybe making a stop to it. So I think I'm familiar a little bit, if that's what you're so I think we have some resources that we can look at in terms of ground rules regarding that.
I say this as someone who's about to stop being the note taker, but I wonder if that could even just really go to whoever's taking note or keeping time, because in the same sense that they try to keep us on track for this is the agenda, this is what we're working on, they could also step in, and then it could also make it not as argumentative, because sometimes people aren't necessarily intending to be derogatory, but sometimes it's a way to be like, hey, that's the direction we're going isn't good, and then maybe we can stop it before it gets to a negative extreme. And if it's coming from someone who is like, I'm taking notes or I'm keeping the time and we just need to move on, that might be a good way to kind of keep, I don't know, as you said, the temperature at a nice keen level, as opposed to someone necessarily feeling reprimanded, because I think it's important when things get too far to reprimand, but if we can prevent it from getting to that point, it might be more conducive to having a productive meeting. It's just a thought.
Is that
So
what
speaking
Paul
of
was trying?
timekeeping, we'll
Yep.
ask the time that we said that we would allocate to this. The chairs may decide otherwise.
Thank you, Beth. I mean, we are at time. Daryl, did you want to say something really quickly?
No, I was just saying, I felt, what you guys were describing there a little bit was a little bit what Paula was saying, that as chairs, you're empowered to do that, to control the room. And so in that sense, you got everybody's backing.
Yeah.
I'm just going to jump in and say that kind of input from you all as a committee, it needs to be sort of baked into all of the committees and their protocols. And not that I want to belabor this charter, but the charter really needs to incorporate that protocol and formalize that. So your input, you guys always seem to be the mavericks out there. Data committee rocks, but it needs to permeate all of the culture within the continuum of care. So, and I think it would be great to get common language that goes into the revision of the charter for this year, but it might, and I don't want the time frame to be too tight. They would love to see if that could be voted on in May, but I suppose that could be moved back. I do think it needs to be in the charter so that each committee chair and any meeting is governed by that kind of protocol.
Right. Yeah, and I'm hoping, I agree, and the Diversity and Equity Committee, if they are able to move forward on revisions to or recommendations to the Charter Committee, that would be great.
I just want to respond and say, I do think it would be nice if there was a person dedicated to sort of helping navigate those situations and making sure ground rules are being followed. But also, I wouldn't want to just sweep it under the rug of we have a certain amount of time, we need to move forward. Like, we also need to address the specific harmful things that are said. So I understand not wanting to let it go on and on and on, but I don't want to just be like, we're running out of time, we have to move forward. Should be a little bit more than that.
Molly, I agree with that.
Molly,
And I appreciate, I'm sorry.
I was going to say I second what Molly said, because that was my experience in the last meeting. I was the timekeeper, and it felt a little bit disingenuous to pretend it was because of time and not really call out the real issue. And sometimes it wasn't because of time, but I still wanted to address it. And so I agree that having two separate purposes is important.
And I think I'm echoing. To TJ's point, like a way of keeping it de-escalated is by pointing to the specific ground rules. So you're directly addressing and saying, this is the ground rule we all agreed to, and this is why, this is unacceptable. And if it's that, like, it's not, it kind of decreases that personalization that maybe TJ you were kind of.
Yes. Thank you. I definitely don't mean sweep it under the rug. I was just saying have it directed so that way hey, this is why this is bad, and try to take a step forward before it gets. I also wasn't present last meeting, so I can't speak from experience. I'm more just saying that's one option of going that route. But yes, no, I don't think we should sweep anything under the rug.
Sorry, I had to plug in my computer. Thank you all. And given that it's 9:34, unless other people have comments, I'm happy to move forward. I just wanted to make that last
point. Okay. Molly, or what do you think? Should I move forward, or what do you want to do?
Oh, yeah, I'm fine with that unless anyone has more comments. I think we're getting a lot of good input right now. So I don't think it's a waste of time, and I think it's okay that we're pushing into the other agenda items. It's an important topic.
We don't have an action step. That is there, do we want to have a couple people try to come up with those ground rules or?
Yeah, I think that's what I was thinking about. Since Molly, myself, and Susie and Shanley meet after this, I know that I have bills that he shared in the Diversity and Equity Committee, and I know that I have some for my organization, and so maybe it's just pulling those together with just our group maybe, and then coming back to the committee. I don't know, what are people feeling about that? And then as far as action items with, I don't know what's going to happen with the Diversity and Equity Committee as they move forward with their recommendations, but I'm assuming there's an action step there as well.
I was just thinking about for us, but what you described sounds great.
Okay.
And I think we may need input from staff. I get confused, like who's allowed to meet when. So Shanley or Susie, if you all have input on if we would be allowed to have like a small group meeting, or if it would just need to be when the co-chairs and staff meet to work on it.
My sense is if there's two homelessness planning council members, it does have to be publicly noticed. But I also think that this is so important that it should be publicly noticed. All it requires is a short agenda and 7 days, 5 days, some number of days notice. And I think that there could be some other committee folks from equity and maybe even some other places to be involved in that conversation.
Okay. Are there people on this call right now that would be interested in meeting in that group to help shape that up? And then we can ask the Diversity and Equity Committee as well.
I would, if, I'll just leave it there. I'd be interested.
Okay, that's great. And if you think about it later too, I think just reach out to Molly and I, and we can do that, and we'll figure out how we can pull that group together. Does that sound good?
And I'm happy to participate too. That's Molly.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm gonna go. Molly, we can just skip my agenda item. I know it was short, just the gaps analysis. So I don't know if there's a more prioritized agenda item maybe that we go to.
So I think we talked about the gaps analysis on the last call a little bit, and we also talked very briefly about the discussion of the street outreach data. I think it was Shanley who wasn't able to go over her FAQ sheet, so maybe Shanley could do that. And is that okay?
That makes sense to me.
Okay. Shanley.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Paul, would you mind passing me the presenter ball? I think that my agenda item goes sort of hand in hand, Molly, with what you were talking about too. So just feel free to hop in. Okay, give me 1 second. So I created a one-pager sort of FAQ based on what I thought might be helpful. This came about, Molly and Elena thought it would be helpful as the data committee sort of champions the effort behind an increase in street outreach data in HMIS, to have some information readily available so that everyone walking into that conversation can feel like an expert in the topic. So I wanted to share with you what it is as a starting point and get some feedback about what other information might be helpful for you to have as we try to encourage agencies to enter data in HMIS. So 1 second. Okay, and it's really ugly. I promise I'll make it cuter when I have some feedback from you all. But essentially, the top portion is just saying that the Homeless Planning Council has endorsed this message to increase HMIS data for street outreach agencies. And I've got different sections. So why is street outreach data so important? This moves us towards a reliable annual number. As you all know, we use a lot of different numbers in our community. We've not found consensus about that.
Shanley,
Street
could you
outreach
zoom
data.
in a little?
Oh,
Could you
yeah.
zoom in a little?
Great point. Is that better?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Street outreach data helps us understand outdoor homelessness in Nashville. So we talked about this before, but the reason that we really could not do anything with the gaps analysis and feel good about it is because we don't have street outreach data or emergency shelter data in HMIS. And that is the starting point and foundation for understanding homelessness in a community. So for example, we have seen a shift away from shelters in the last year as a response to COVID. And so anecdotally, what we want to say and what we've seen and experienced is that people have moved to the outdoors. What we don't have is the data to back that up. So really this boils down to us using anecdotes to try to explain the reality of homelessness. So that's another reason that we're trying to increase this data. I won't read all of these, but there's some other points about why it's important. So where are we now? And again, this is repetitive. I've said a lot of this in this space before, but Nashville's available HMIS data is currently unreliable because it reflects only what funding is currently flowing through the city. And so that means that there's no reliable or consistent baseline in understanding patterns because it's reflecting funding, not reality. So this is a barrier at this point, or sort of the reason that we are here now is because we only just went live with data sharing in HMIS in August of last year. So prior to that, it was a pretty unrealistic ask for us to expect agencies doing street outreach to add things into coordinated entry for tangible resources and also to duplicate that same information into a street outreach provider in HMIS. But now that we're live with data sharing, this boils down to the next section, which is how much extra work is entering street outreach data. If you're entering someone into the coordinated entry process, this is just a couple clicks. So it's really not a big ask in terms of additional data entry. And in fact, we've adjusted the process in HMIS to make those really streamlined. So I think it's like a net lack of time that you'd have to do HMIS data entry between coordinated entry and street outreach with some of the updates to the workflow. And then this is a little bit about the difference between coordinated entry and street outreach. So essentially, coordinated entry is meant to run parallel to another project type. So people access the homeless service system through either a shelter or street outreach interaction, and that's how they enter in for mainstream resources through coordinated entry. When funders look at our system, they see only what is entered into a street outreach project or an emergency shelter project, which right now is a tiny fraction of what is real and what we know is happening in our community. So we do ourselves a pretty big disservice because we're not able to present the reality through data, which is what people want to see when they're considering a funding decision. So that's sort of a general breakdown. There's some more in here that I didn't read, but I wondered if you were going to be using this to start a conversation and try to engage an agency or push the conversation forward, what other information do you think would be helpful for you to feel confident in that moment?
So I love that, Shanley. I think it's going to be very powerful for advocacy and buy-in to supporting the data input for street outreach. So I think a lot of those top ones are like my concern, and I probably shouldn't be the first one talking because I don't do street outreach or I'm not, on the ground provider. But I think, do you hear a lot, and I feel like I've heard, is just kind of well, what if we don't have enough staff to do this? And I don't know if we would have any bullet points to put under that, but you know, what supports exist, which there might be none, so we might not want to poke that.
No, well, so that's a really good point. So that has been definitely, I don't want to pretend that the barriers that exist aren't valid, because I did data entry at Nashville Cares and HMIS for years and years, and it was the vein of my existence. So like, I get it. But I think that we keep ourselves in this position where we just don't know, like we don't have numbers to back it up. And I do think there are some benefits to doing HMIS work. A lot of conversation around street outreach is about how can we coordinate better. And this system gives us so many powerful tools to allow us to do that. But it becomes exponentially more helpful the more participation we have. So if there's only like a 10% buy-in and participation, that's not really going to be very beneficial for the community. In terms of staff time, I think that as a community, if we've decided that understanding what's going on in Nashville is important enough to us, that as a community, we should be trying to address those barriers, because it is real and it is substantial. But how do we move forward? I don't know. I don't have the dollars to pay a salary, although I wish I did.
Right.
I think too, something that we can talk about as we continue to make appearances in the street outreach meetings that are kind of ramping back up to occur regularly again, when sharing information out and doing some of that like data literacy piece, that showing what information we have and being able to show that back out to the folks who are entering it to see the effects of that. And then also talking about workflow, which might be conversations with, you know, leadership, supervisors, talking about if someone is doing street outreach, or if you work an 8-hour day, you do street outreach for 6 hours, and then you catch up on all your data entry from the day. That's just an example. But thinking about how this is part of the work, and how to kind of implement it into the way the work is done, so that it becomes more seamless and doesn't feel as much like something that's being tacked on top, because I'm thinking of it as part of the work instead of something extra being added on. So that's that education piece. You know, those things can take a while, and we know that. So we want to like be bringing these things up in conversations as we talk about benefits, and as we talk about, you know, training new outreach workers and folks who work in emergency shelters, for example, who come on, that this is, you know, part of the community effort. So that's definitely, we're having the same thoughts and lots of conversations. That's very good.
I think what you just said about benefits is real important for directors and people who are going to say, okay, let's do it. You know, if you had some testimonials, we're doing this and it's changed our ability to do things. And this is how it's helped our organization, versus, you know, we don't have this data, so we don't know what the problem is. The data we do have, I use the system, and boy, it's really helped my agency. If you can sell that benefit versus I'm going to do all this and I'm, you know, it's clunky and I don't really know how it's helping. You know, I got this kind of grand thing for the community. Everybody has these numbers. That's kind of an altruistic thing, and we should be about that. But also, you know, you're going to spend time and energy. You'll have so many dollars. How is it going to benefit my agency? And how has it benefited other agencies? If you can get those testimonies forward, you know, you probably get better buy-in.
I love
that's
it.
10 minutes
And
on this
to the
topic.
client too. Yeah, I love both of that.
Thank you, Beth. Yep, we're on 10 minutes on this topic. So do we want to keep going on it?
Can I respond to Daryl? And I have an idea. I was going to say something very similar. One, we can encourage people that when they're writing grants or asking for funding, that they're thinking about data entry coordinators specifically for HMIS. Park Center has done that with 2 of our grants, and now we have that, and it helps tremendously. And then secondly, about the like testimonials, yeah, I do think the FAQ could include what we've been able to do with that. And so for me, the coordination I've seen has increased tremendously, even before we had like the street outreach specific project in HMS, but like coordinating rapid rehousing funding has been incredible in the pandemic. And also the recent coordination of getting people prioritized for Section 8 who were victims of the flood has been really awesome. So like those are examples of successes, you know, that we've had because of the coordination between entities.
Yeah, I would just add in there that I think I know wanting to make a difference between coordinated entry and street outreach mode is important, but in reality, the way you can communicate this to people and what's real, how this affects people the most, is people get housed when their data is in HMIS. People continue to live on the street when their data is not in HMIS. So if you're really out there trying to solve homelessness, you need to be participating in HMIS. That's how they get access to vouchers. That's how they get access to rapid rehousing. That's how they get access to the things they're going to need if they're not able to pay for housing on their own, which most of them aren't. So if you're not participating in that program, you're not helping the problem.
That's such an important point, Jesse. And I know we skipped the agenda item on the gaps analysis, but, you know, along with the local and your organizational testimonials, but just using the fact that we can, the better data we have, we can actually do better predictions. So I think there's a linkage in the story there that we can share, not to make this FAQ sheet too big, but just saying, you know, this is what we know right now, and this is all the data we're missing, but we can improve how many affordable housing units we'll need. If you help us with this piece, we can actually do this. So I think there is a connection there, and I agree with you on that, but I don't know what that looks like in terms of us telling a story of getting buy-in, but I agree.
I can definitely add a section about the benefits for the agencies. I think that's super important. I got shivers when you guys were just talking about how important data was, so that made me feel good. Thanks.
Well, the other thing that gets in the way is, you know, what definition of homelessness we're using. So if it's not the literal homeless and you're serving people that aren't being counted as literal, but they need those services, they're kind of boxed out from even the benefits because their people don't qualify.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that, Daryl. For one of our grants, we have a very broad definition of homelessness, and there are some people that we're trying to house and they're not eligible for Section 8 or urban housing solutions because they're not literally homeless. And yeah, that is difficult. I agree with you there. We should keep talking about that.
Right.
Because
you have that many people.
You send the message that you're not sick enough for us to help you. So we can't prevent it. But when you get sicker, then we can help you.
Yeah, I met a woman who was staying in a hotel on Murfreesboro Pike for months, maybe a year, with her two daughters one is on disability and has serious health issues. And they're living off her disability, and then they fly a sign during the day. And I was talking to her about how we could work with her, but there wouldn't be many housing opportunities available to them because they weren't literally homeless, and that made her so upset. And I agreed with her. It's very frustrating. It's like, she's like, so I have to leave this hotel and go out into a camp, and she's in a wheelchair. And then you'll help me. And I'm like, yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Well, yeah, that's a huge gap too, and what we don't know is the amount of people that are living in motels, and so that's one more reason to collect the data. So if we need to realign resources or we're changing rules to make resources accessible to people, we have something to back that up.
Yeah, that's hard. I'm sorry. I mean, I just work under the HHS definition, so it's a little bit different, but that's tough.
Yeah, I think it must be a conversation we have with folks in charge of the housing opportunities. I know that they want to prioritize the most vulnerable, but we do have very vulnerable people who aren't literally homeless, who still need help. Otherwise, they just continue to be homeless.
Right.
And just to defend the definition, that locally, that's not a local decision that they need to meet that literal homeless definition. If it's HUD funds, they're the ones that determine that. So it does seem kind of squirrely, but.
Well, it's also for the urban housing solutions matching. They have to be literally homeless.
Okay, well, they have one HUD grant that they have to meet that with, but not all of their housing, so.
Yeah, so I wonder if those people would be, if the people who aren't literally homeless would be eligible for the other housing, but what if they don't have income? Maybe that grant is just for people who don't have income. I don't know. So maybe learning more about where their grant funds come from and why they have to make certain decisions could be really helpful. And maybe pursuing different funding so that they can help people who are in like different definitions of homelessness.
So with 4 minutes left, what do we want to go from here? Just kind of thinking, so it sounds like we'll update the FAQ with testimonials and benefits. Keep working on what success, like the storyline of what success, what we're able to do if we had this data. What are some other action steps we can do from here?
I guess I was hoping we could have some champions, like organizations that already have their street outreach programs, like Park Center and Salvation Army, reach out to the organizations who aren't already doing it. And with that FAQ sheet, try to talk to those organizations. So we would need some coordination, obviously, who's already doing it and who's not, and who could call who, if people could volunteer to do that.
I think that we would be happy to do that. Right now, though, we're the pariah of the street outreach community, so I don't know that we will be well received at the moment.
Wait, what did you say, Jesse?
We're not currently popular among the street outreach community because everybody thinks we're trying to shut down Jefferson Street Camp, which is not true, but nonetheless, word has gotten out incorrectly. So, yeah, just FYI.
You're okay in my book.
Mine as well. We appreciate you, Jesse. One of the things too is just thinking about other forums where we can, when the FAQ sheet is ready, we can talk about it. And I know some of the strategic plan items under the executive committee, which I'm a part of as vice chair, we will be doing some community engagement like outreach and forums or presentations. So making sure that we can address housing providers in that situation too. So just kind of brainstorming where else we can have those conversations. So provider champions, but then also the larger community as well. So
I know that is incredibly helpful from our perspective. I mean, our initiatives come from the plan that was set by the Planning Council. And so when we're trying to push the strategic plan, but then it feels like it's really, really, really powerful. I think peer accountability in the community for you all in those spaces to say how important you think data is and how it's been positive for your agency and for the people that you serve. And so, and it's been just exciting to see that happening naturally as you've seen the benefits in your agencies. So that's really powerful, is for the agencies to be the champions of this movement.
Looks like we have 1 minute. I know I'm not the timekeeper. So.
I gave up.
I know.
I think we should talk about though how next month is supposed to be in person, right?
Oh shoot, yes.
Yeah. So, Susie, will we be going back to MDHA offices, and how will that work? Will we be spaced out? We'll need to wear masks.
I have to check with the folks at our buildings. I haven't been there in ages. I think that people would be welcome, but it would be not, I mean, you know how tight the room was in the olden days. So I would say spacing will not be observed. We could look at the bigger space across the street. But often what happens with that is if something kind of urgent comes up, we would be bumped. And then all of a sudden we're in this squirrely space. Let me check that out and I can get back to you. But I can assure you if it's in our warehouse building, it would not be distancing.
You have a pretty spaced out parking lot. We could, have a picnic.
That'd be fun. Well, probably be nice.
Park Center has a pretty large conference room. I could see if we could use that. I think we would be able to space out in there.
Yeah, that's got some space.
So are we waiting on the governor to say you can or can't have Zoom meetings anymore? Is that what this is decision made on? And do we know that information?
I think it expires at the end of the month. And I think at least folks in the know are feeling like the governor wanting to open things up is going to display that by not extending that order. So.
He's been trying to end the order for a long time, so it's just feeling like we're just waiting for the ball to drop. So being more prepared than less prepared, I think, will be a benefit, so we can feel safe and whatever. And we're meeting in a couple minutes to formalize the notes for the Homeless Planning Council, so we can continue to brainstorm spaces that might feel safe.
Okay, so it's not confirmed yet, but if it is confirmed that we have to meet in person, we'll come up with an in-person plan and alert the committee.
I feel safe in any space, so that's my vote.
Are we mostly vaccinated at this point?
I got my first one. I'm partial.
All the way.
I would be.
I mean, I think we still have to operate under the assumption
that some of us aren't, right?
Yeah.
That's the vaccine may not always work.
So that makes it more urgent to have real distance.
Yeah.
Also, if you don't agree with that, feel free to tell the governor.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Well, it sounds like we're going to continue this with the chair meeting, getting our notes together. And so hopefully there's going to become some communication, I'm sure, before that, so that you all know. But I think
I need a quick bathroom break. Oh, sorry. Oh, shoot.
On that note,
feel free to go.
Would you like me to put that in the minutes?
While you go.
Sorry, ladies. I just need a little bit of break before we meet.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. Okay. Now I'm gonna mute.
Okay.
I just want to add a quick thank you. I think we've had a really tough year and a half, and I'm grateful for Elena as a co-chair and for this committee for being very supportive of everything that we're doing. So thank you all, and thank you, Elena, and to our staff too, who support us.
I second that. Thank you, Molly. Thank you all. All right. Have a great Friday, guys.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.